Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm Kevin Schroeder, your host. I'm here with my co-host, Ed Mamet.
Hello, everyone. Here we are again with another distinguished guest. I hope you enjoy our program.
So today's guest on Cop Talk is Pat Russo. Pat Russo is retired NYPD Sergeant. He was also in the Okay. He was also in the forefront of community policing in the 1990s in New York City. Also, he was part of the groundbreaking for programs such as Field Intelligence Officers and Cops and Kids Boxing. Pat, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Pat, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, background, where you grew up?
Well, I grew up on Bay 8th Street in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I went to Lafayette High School and later to St. Joseph's College when they decided I wasn't smart enough to be a sergeant because I didn't have 60 credits. So I had to go back to college.
At first you didn't need credits. Then
you didn't need credits, but when I passed the sergeant's test, they did. I was the first class that required 60 credits to remain a sergeant.
Yeah. So you came on 84?
I came on in 1984,
you were
correct.
assigned from the academy, you were assigned to the 72?
Well, yeah, out of the academy, I was assigned to NSU 11 originally, that covered Brooklyn South, the 11th Division, and I was ultimately assigned to the 7-2 precinct.
What precincts did the NSU 11 cover?
NSU 11 covered the 6-8, 7-2, 7-8.
And you turned out a 7-2?
We turned out at a 7-8 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you, for our audience, explain what NSU means?
NSU is the Neighborhood Stabilization Unit, and you were assigned an FTO, a field training officer, to make sure you knew how to become a police officer, how to write summonses, how to effect arrests. So it was the beginning stages of entering patrol in the police department.
That was right out of the police academy.
That was right out of the police academy, correct.
So, Pat, how did your early experience with community policing shape your philosophy?
Well, how I became, I was asked to go into the CPOP unit. At the time, when I was assigned to the 7-2 was the model precinct for community policing, for CPOP. And I had just came out of NSU 11, and I just boxed in Madison Square Garden against the fire department. It was my first fight. And they picked a great sergeant. I don't know if you knew him, Andy McGooey. Andy McGooey was the sergeant that was assigned to take on this task, and it was the first precinct in the city where you would assign cops to a specific beat, and that cop was accountable to the community. So right out of the academy, they wanted why I was told I was chosen because it was a plum job for a cop. You had weekends off and you kind of made your own hours, and some people abused that fact by just making their own hours that helped in their personal lives. In other words, they worked late on Monday and they worked
Early blow
6 to 2s on Fridays. but because we had so many eyes on us, because of the model precinct, we actually worked depending on the conditions in our command. So if we had late night conditions, we worked late night to address those conditions. And we were accountable, and they made sure that we were accountable to that community that had problems in that neighborhood. So
tell us about your involvement then with the FIO, Field Intelligence Officer.
Well, that goes well ahead of how the Field Intelligence Officer program started, because it originally started as I was kind of frustrated because we were accountable to that community, and the Sunset Park area of Brooklyn at the time was notorious for gangs and drugs. It was bad. Now we're talking the 80s and the early 90s. It was, and prostitution was everywhere. It was, and if you want to see it firsthand, please see the documentary with Rudy Giuliani, the Gotham, The Rise and Fall in New York City. It shows what we went through in the 70s and how the police department turned stuff around and the administration. Well, I was frustrated because we were accountable to the community, but you have to remember, Ed, patrol were not allowed. It was taboo for patrol to get involved with narcotics arrest.
That's correct.
For fear of corruption.
Right.
And in my opinion, that fear of corruption led to corruption, because if you had cops out there, and I did the classes to teach everybody how to implement this, and I would always say the fear of corruption led to corruption, and I'll explain it this way, that if you have cops that you're telling the community is going to solve their problems, and you go out there and their main problems is drugs that are destroying their blocks and their buildings and their neighborhood, and then the cops, you watch that cop, you watch drug dealers dealing drugs right in front of that cop, but he's told by the department, you can't, that's not your job. Do an intelligence report to narcotics and let them do the job. Let them do their job. Right. And to be perfectly honest, narcotics at the time was a numbers generating organization, and they went out and they just tried to get the most numbers that they get. But I shouldn't paint that with a broad brush, because you had the right guys in narcotics that did things for the right reasons and tried to solve problems. So I was very frustrated at the time, because you're making me go out there and meet Mrs. Rodriguez, who on 49th Street, they're taking over, and then you're telling me I can't address. So either Mrs. Rodriguez looked at me as you're corrupt, they're paying you off, or you don't really give a shit about us because you're not doing anything, or you're inept. You don't know how to do your job. So it was a good experience, but it was a frustrating experience. So I put in to go to narcotics. I go to narcotics, and I got a great sergeant, Harry Knorr, and he taught us how to solve problems. I learned how to cultivate confidential informants. I learned how to execute search warrants, and I built a great relationship with DA investigators and personal relationships with DA executives in Charles Hines' office. And I had all their home numbers, and we were doing search warrants. We got into it. But I made sure that I got assigned to the 7-2 precinct. Now, doesn't it make sense that I'm a CPOP cop, community affairs cop in the 7-2, and now I'm assigned to the 7-2 precinct narcotics team? So everything clicked, and I was able to really help solve the problems. Then I get promoted to sergeant. Now, because I had that great relationship with the politicians in the 7-2, because I was a community player, they took me back to the 7-2 as a sergeant, which you know, Ed, it's rare that you go back to your precinct where you're a police officer as a boss for reasons that you know too many people as a cop, and they don't want you telling them what to do. But they thought that because CPOP was around and they wanted CPOP to really work, they put me back there and right into the community policing unit. So at time we go out, and now I'm in this community policing unit. Now I know how to solve problems. I know how to cultivate confidential informants. So I start off by putting my intelligence reports into narcotics, and narcotics was unresponsive. But I'm still accountable to that community, and I wasn't going to accept that they weren't responsive. I go to my boss, my lieutenant, Mike Shortell, may he rest in peace, and he says, let's do it. Let's do it. Let me get the okay from the CO, was Inspector Graff at the time. I think he was Deputy Inspector Graff, and he says, do it. You're doing police work. So we went. I had a relationship with the district attorney's office, and we started targeting. And I bring up 49th Street all the time because it was a notorious block in the precinct that the hairbags, the old timers in the precinct would say, don't even go down that block. Just let them kill each other, and you take reports later. And I said, that's unacceptable. That's not acceptable. There's 99% of the good people live on that block, just want help. Because of that 1% runs the block, and they're destroying the quality of life in that neighborhood. So we went out, and with the district attorney's office, we cultivated a couple of confidential informants, because our beat cops were on that block every day. They knew everybody. They knew the good guys, and they knew those recidivist bad guys. And we cultivated a couple of real good confidential informants. We did a nice case, and we hit search warrants, and we shut the block down. We made real nice arrests, and we got them, we A1'd them. So they faced, A1 is the highest felony you could be arrested for, and they did 25 to life, the main people.
Yeah. Pat, tell us about the Cops and Kids boxing program.
Well, that really came out of that, locking up. In the beginning, before we did the search warrants and everything and targeted that same person, that Hispanic woman on that block, came to us and said, you got to do something about the people. And we gave our intelligence reports on narcotics, and narcotics just killed the block with B&B, buy and bust. They just went there, they locked them up, but they were what they were doing, they was locking up the street dealers. And if you know about a drug location, you got your street dealers, you got your runners, and then you got your boss, the guy that owns the spot. It's like John Gotti was the boss, and he had his captains and he had his soldiers. It's the same thing. They were a miniature organized crime network. But we were just locking up the kids on the block who were dealing the drugs in the street. We were doing our job. We were addressing the problem was in their face. And then we went to a meeting before we did the search warrant, and we said, narcotics made over 100 arrests on the block. And she ripped up the paper, this woman that we were dealing with personally, the block president, and said, you did nothing. You did nothing. They were replaced immediately, and now you have a whole generation of kids with felony arrest records. That what are they going to do in their lives? And those are our kids that they're recruiting to do these things. Yeah. So a bell went off in my head that we needed to get to these kids before that drug dealer that's running that spot gets to them. So we do the case, the big case. Now we say we got to address these kids because somebody's going to try to fill that void that's created because that's a drug block, and everybody knows it. And we opened up we called up the police athletically, and they were great. They came down immediately. They said, what do you need? They said, we need a boxing ring. We need some equipment. We need everything. So he goes, we'll give you everything you need. You got to take ownership of it. In other words, they wanted us to kind of administer and run the program. Right, yeah. We'll give you coaches, and that was 35 years ago. Thousands of kids have come through the program since, and
so they found the location for you?
We located. We went to we had a great relationship with the politicians at the time, or elected officials, and they found us the location. If you're familiar with Sunset Park, there's a park house, and there's a pool there. So for 10 months of the year, the pool is closed, and a big empty space that served as the locker room for the kids was empty. It was just empty. So we said, give us that space. Parks Department said no. The politician said, no, you're going to give them this space. We opened the first Cops and Kids program there. And just for a little levity, we did our first fundraiser in the Grand Prospect Hall, which is now a parking lot. They're building they're making luxury condos there. And we had we got Senator Chris Megg, a Republican, box against a council member. Sal Albanese was the main event, and Arthur McCanty, the senior who did Frazier Ali, was the referee, and Jackie Mason, the comedian Jackie Mason, was the MC.
Now, didn't Dana White help you guys out too?
Well, Dana White, this is just recently. Yeah. Dana White came into the picture.
Years later.
Yeah. Well, this is just recently. Dana White heard about the program, contacted the chief of department's office, put him in contact, and we made a list of everything that we needed, and he gave us all kinds of, probably $250,000 worth of strength and conditioning equipment. We have three programs right now. One in Flatbush, Brooklyn, one in Park Hill, Staten Island, and one in the Berry Houses in Staten Island.
You run all three spots?
Yeah, we run all three spots. It's run by the NYPD boxing team.
Okay, but you're also the coach, right?
Well, I'm the
Boxing
director of the team now.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great, yeah. We had
My partner is a retired Lieutenant Dave Seif.
Yeah.
He's my partner. He does all the coaching.
we had one of your former boxers on the podcast, Joe Murray.
Oh, Joe Murray was my attorney.
Yeah. Well,
Joe Murray's a
boxing and attorney.
great
I love
man.
Joe,
Yeah.
Joe and I were cops together in Midtown.
Yeah, he's
back in the day.
Joe Murray's a comeback boxing
yeah.
story. Yeah.
But that's a great program. And how many years later? 35 years later?
35,000 of kids have come through the team.
Unbelievable.
And a majority of the NYPD boxing team
Yeah.
were knucklehead kids. They came through the program. We told them, take the test, get off the streets. And they took the test, and you know what? They became great cops. Two in particular, Hector Lopez, first-grade detective today, and Jamal Spence, another first-grade detective. They came out of our Cops and Kids program, the PAL program, when it was Cops and Kids in the Bronx, Webster Houses. And they they were street kids from the neighborhood, turned their life around, first-grade detectives. Because they both went into narcotics because they were perfect. They were undercovers, and they went out and bought drugs and guns and cleaned up a lot of neighborhoods.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Good
So
work,
it's
Pat.
recruitment.
Yeah.
The Cops and Kids is recruitment. It's crime prevention. Because if you got, in our Flatbush gym, we get probably 50, 60 kids a day. That's crime prevention. That's 50, 60 kids that are not in the street. It's recruitment because a lot of those kids, we're forcing them. We're making them take the police test. And then we're sitting with them and we're getting them through the applicant investigation process where a lot of these kids that don't have the right guidance at home can't get through that process. Right. How to get them their credits. So it's recruitment, it's crime prevention, it's mentorship. So it really is part of police work. And the police commissioner today loves it. And Chief Madry, who boxed as a kid, he kind of loves it, and he gives us.
Oh, great!
Yeah,
you have the support, which is great. Yeah,
he just recently assigned us a kid that came through the program, Nisa Rodriguez, and she's the perfect metaphor for boxing because she was a 16-year-old. She dropped out of high school, and she became a single mother at 17. Dropped out of high school, single mother at 17. And then that bell, she started boxing. That bell went off in her head. And she went out and she got her GED. She went to college, got a teaching degree, went to work for the Department of Education for 8 years. After 8 years, take the test. We always used to tell her, take the test, take the test. And she goes, you know what? I'm going to try it. Takes the test, gets called for the police department, leaves teaching. She becomes a cop. She's assigned to a precinct in Manhattan, and the executives met her, fell in love with her, loved her story, and they say, you know what? You would be a great role model recruiter for this program. He assigned her to the Cops and Kids program. She's got a desk right in the gym in Flatbush Gardens, Brooklyn, and all she does all day is mentor those kids, gets them to take the test, gets them to graduate high school, the first thing, and then she just keeps them off the street. She goes out in that community and recruits the kids that are creating havoc in that Flatbush community, gets them in and just to turn around their lives. Because that's what's lacking, I believe, in a lot of these neighborhoods. They need the right role models and the right opportunity to be around good people to change their lives, and it works.
Yeah, it does work.
We wouldn't be around 30 years if it didn't work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Captain?
You mentioned CPOP several times for our audience. Could you explain what that acronym stands for?
CPOP is the Community Police Officers Program.
And it began when?
It began in 1984.
Just when I became a captain.
Yes, sir.
I hated it.
a lot of people hated it because you had to make sure patrol and that radio was answered. But this is at a different time than today, where I think we had 38, maybe even 40,000 cops at that time. We just don't have those type of resources today.
Well, the reason I hated it, first of all, the cop that was assigned, he just went on his own. We didn't know what he was doing or where he was. And then we had this gigantic beat book to look at. It was my job. And it took away from my other duties, and I wouldn't even bother reading it. I would just sign off on it. And every so often I say, where was our CPOP officer? No one knew where he was.
Yeah. So but now I'm telling you, you picked the wrong sergeant. You had to, and at the time, because we were under a lot of scrutiny from the press and from the elected officials, because we were the model precinct. They made sure they handpicked everybody that came into this unit. And I'm telling you, we had a brilliant sergeant, Andy McGooey, that handpicked everybody that came into that unit. And he made sure that he was going to know where they were, and he made sure that they were taking care of the problems in the neighborhood, in the community they were assigned to.
Well, the genesis of CPOP was what we called NPT, Neighborhood Police Team, that goes back to the 70s. And that came out as a result of the Knapp Commission. Okay, so we had, no, actually it predated the Knapp Commission. And then that fell into disuse. And then later on came a program called TOPAC, T-O-P-A-C. It was called Total Officer Police something or other, or Total Patrol something or other. Then came CPOP. But they were all based on the original NPT program that went back to the 70s. Now, also, you mentioned names. I worked with all of them. You mentioned Graff, Richard Graff.
Yeah.
He came out of Highway Patrol.
Yes, he did.
I worked with him. And
He was my CO in the
you
7
mentioned
too.
Shortell.
Mike Shortell.
Right, I knew him. And Harry Knorr. I knew them all.
Yeah.
So
All great people. All made me the man I am today. Really,
right. So
those were real good supervisors that taught you how to be a cop.
now, also another thing you brought out, where we have a connection. I spent 7 years in narcotics, so I did 5 years of undercover work, and the other 2 I did in the SIU, Special Investigations. So I'm very familiar with the way narcotics works, and I think you, excuse me. So you have good experience there, in narcotics, which I can understand how it translated into what you were doing as far as search warrants and other work. It was a good training experience.
Oh, it was
Right now,
it was luck that had it that my career ended up.
so
that way.
getting back to the 90s, how did collaboration between the police department, prosecutors, and politicians influence the fight against crime? Because crime went up, crime went down, administration changed. But in the 90s, when you were there, how did that work?
Well, I had, but because we took our job seriously in the 70s, not that anybody doesn't take their job seriously, but it was mainly because we were the focus of a lot of attention, me and the model precinct, and we were given a lot of latitude to get the job done. So the district attorney's office knew that, the Brooklyn district attorney's office. So we became personal. We built personal relationships with them. So say if we were out on a set, out in a neighborhood doing a drug operation, and we lock somebody up on the street, and all of a sudden we get them back to the precinct, and they want to cooperate. We have good investigators that are talking to them, and they want to cooperate, and they want to give us our target. We could call them at home, and they would send out a writing ADA to write a search warrant for us on the top, and we'd call emergency service, and 6 o'clock in the morning. This is in a perfect world, but we had a perfect world going, and we were able to execute search warrants. So that's why I think the problems today is we don't, and I'm not on the job today, but I could give an educated guess, is the relationship is not there today with these 5 district attorneys. Well, in Staten Island, I believe it is, but I don't believe the other district attorneys have that relationship with those street cops that are accountable to the community. If I was the mayor, I'd sit down to all district attorneys and say, you got to build a relationship with my cops. You got to work together. We work for the community. And the community's telling us we have problems in that community. Long-lasting problems with recidivist felons that are destroying the quality of life in our community. And I'm demanding, as the mayor of the city, that you work with my cops to solve these problems. And I think it would go a long way to fixing the problem that we're dealing with, the fear in the city of recidivists that are just out of control.
Well, there's also a sea change at the city council.
Yeah, no, that's a major problem, and I try to do my best to bring it to the public's attention that it's the cops are not the problem. It's bad legislation. It's bad elected officials that for years demonized the cops and put a target on their backs, made their job almost impossible with these ridiculous laws that don't help the community. And I think Mayor Adams has the bully pulpit. He's got to get out there and be more forceful to hold them accountable. It's not fair that a cop's got to go to a community meeting every couple of weeks or every month, and a DA doesn't have to be there, because they're part of the system. And if they don't work together, how are we ever going to do it if you keep locking up the same perps all the time? You're spitting in the wind. You're not solving the problem.
Well, there are two things that I want to bring out. Number one, the problem with the city council is a direct result of term limits. Okay, what happened before, with my time, you had the same people in the council, went on and on for you. You built relationships with them. You knew who they were. They worked with you. Term limits destroyed all that. You get all these new council people come in and they change over and become so-called progressive. And they are not really helpful to the police. As far as Adams goes, he doesn't have the balls, in plain English, to take on his party. He's a Democrat. The city council are Democrats, the state legislatures. This is a big problem with him. He won't call them out.
Well, if he wants to get reelected again, I think he's got to do it.
Well,
He's got to make a change, and he's got to.
So I wouldn't count on him to to get this thing going. Now, regarding cops and kids, how did the program build trust between the community and the police? How did the trust build between the cops and the community that he served, the kids?
Because the press covered it a lot, the local press. So in other words, the local press would give us props that we were running a free boxing youth center for the kids in the neighborhood. And we like every day you read the papers and you see this guy did something, this kid did something bad, that kid did something bad. We would highlight the great things our kids were doing. And, it's very easy for us to do it today because we have social media. And we're able to put it out there on our social media that a kid see, boxing is, I hate that we call it a boxing program because it's a youth center. We use boxing to attract the most at-risk kids because of the mere violence of the sport attracts the kids that want to be perceived as tough guys. But probably only 20% of the kids that are in the program actually box. So we highlight the good kids in the program. And say if a kid gets in, we instituted something that I stole from Michael Bloomberg as give a monetary reward for kids that do good in school. We don't have Michael Bloomberg's money, so any kid that gets over a 90 on his report card, we give him a $50 bill from a cop. Now, people in the community see that. They love it. You got cops not locking up our kids. You got cops taking care of our kids. But locking up, this is why I was hoping to sell you on community policing. This was our idea, how we were taught to be CPOP cops, to be community policing cops, to take care of the community who pays our salary, right? When you have a perp telling you, I pay your salary, I'm not going to listen to you. In reality, he does. They pay taxes, they pay our salary. So we're accountable to them. And they're the boss, and we do what they ask us to do. They asked us to take care of our kids and lock up bad guys. And that's what our perception there as the model precinct for community policing, and which was, I believe, because Maple and Anamone pulled me when I started doing the search warrants. I kind of left that out. When we started doing the search warrants on patrol, when I was first, so it was unsanctioned. The job found out we were doing it and stopped us immediately. I was pissed off. And I put in to go back as a sergeant to narcotics, and I was sent to internal affairs. So my boss, Lieutenant Mike Shortell, went up to work for Maple directly, Maple and Anamone. and he told them about the program, and they pulled me out of internal affairs, put me back in the 7-2
Lucky
precinct.
for you.
Yeah, but that's my point is you hated CPOP, but you probably had the wrong supervisors involved. If you had the right people involved and they were taught the right way. But because we were the model precinct, we had to sit through hours and hours of lectures on how to do this, how to be accountable to the community. But those lecturers it was the new school, John Jay, the new school, and they live in academia. They don't live on the streets. They don't get it.
There's no doubt that the police have great influence over children. Yeah. And this goes back to the origins of the PAL back in the 1930s. That was started by a single cop who was helping these kids, he taught them how to play ball and the like, and that morphed into a great organization. Now, are you familiar with SPECTA, S-P-E-C-D-A? The police department had that program?
No.
School program to educate and control drug abuse.
Yes.
And that was an offshoot of a program called DARE. D-A-R-E.
Got a lot of federal money for that. Yeah.
Right, which is drug, I can't remember the acronym. Anyway, I was put in charge of SPECTA, where we had uniformed cops teaching children in the school about the horrors of
drug use.
Drugs. And the idea was to keep them away from drugs. That's how we, how it was named School Program to Educate and Control Drug Abuse. And basically it was the DARE program. And I believed in that, not only because I was in charge of it for 3 years, but I saw the changes. It was very
Without
good.
a doubt, yeah.
So I'm quite familiar with that, and there's, that's how I know that police can influence children. And quite a few of the kids that went through the program became cops.
Yeah, it's the same thing we're doing in the Cops and Kids program. Right. But now you talk about the city council. City council probably hated that they had cops. And I'm not talking about all the city council, but there are certain members on the city council that probably hated to have uniformed police officers within the schools,
Well,
it
was a different city council. They didn't have term limits at the time.
Well, which is ridiculous because I think retired guys should be allowed to get a teaching degree and go teach kids in school.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, no, but the double dipping aspect, the state law, they should change the law. But I think it would be great to have a cop mentoring and teaching kids, and just all around. I think it's just a wonderful idea.
Today's version of community policing is NCO, correct?
Correct.
Neighborhood
Same exact
community
thing.
Officer,
Yep.
right? And there was a time when they stopped community policing. Then they brought back something different called NCO. Actually, same concept, but it's a different name.
Yep.
NCO, right?
Yeah, and the NCOs today, because I do a lot of reading on like I'm a retired police buff, and a lot of the NCOs are going out there and doing what we did. We set the foundation there with community policing, and the NCOs are going out and hitting search warrants. Who would have ever thought that patrol cops would be doing that stuff? But what did you become a cop for? You became a cop to help people and lock up bad guys, and which is going back to the Knapp Commission, the Mullen Commission. Those commissions were necessary because they dealt with massive corruption, but they went overboard when you restrict people from doing their job, especially people that are accountable to the community. I think it had the opposite effect.
Yeah, well, that's what usually happens after these big investigations.
Yeah.
You throw out the baby with the bathwater.
That's exactly the phrase I use all the time.
I did 40 years. I've seen this happen. I went through the Knapp Commission, the Mullen Commission. It goes back and forth. And so usually afterward, there's a long period of like lay low, don't do very much, and very little initiative.
Which is...
Right.
You can't have that in the police department. You can't have just go be a report taker, which is getting back to the city council. They're the problem right now. Certain members of the city council, they want you to just be report takers. This How Many Stops Act is the most ridiculous thing in the world. Yeah. You just bogging down your cops, especially your active cops, into just doing paperwork, which I believe is their motivation. They want us to just be report takers. and that's not what.
That's one of the reasons why crime is going up.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of the reasons why people are leaving the city, and it really is. It's disheartening the amount of people that are leaving the city and the people that don't want to go into Manhattan. The mayor is the mayor, and I think he's got to stand up to them and he's got to call them out. And I like that he's given the executives today the right to speak up for their cops and call out these politicians that are just making ridiculous legislation that are making our city less safe.
Well, I disagree with you on that.
We could disagree.
So let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
Well, before we get into that,
Yeah.
because this is going to be a pretty good discussion, let's take a moment to thank our sponsor, Good Greek Movers. Good Greek Moving and Storage has been named National Movers of the Year and the most referred moving company in the U.S. Spiro Georgitakis, CEO and founder, was also a police officer, so he knows the importance of safety and the risk of moving. All of the movers are screened and drug tested to ensure your safety. His movers are professionally trained at the Good Greek Academy to learn how to wrap, pack, unpack, load, and unload your precious belongings so you have a safe trip to your new home. Good Greek is your total relocation company that will help you find a home, sell a home, get you insurance, transport your car, take your junk, and move you. They are your one-stop shop in your relocation needs. Good Greek Moving and Storage is the official movers of 18 colleges in Florida as well as Major League sports teams in Florida. So whether it's a move across town, across the country, trust America's best movers, Good Greek. Schedule your move today at goodgreek.com. And by the way, I just recently moved, and I also used Greek Movers, and this isn't a commercial, this is real, fact, reality, and they were great. They called to make sure, they called to let me know that when they would be there. They called to make sure that the movers were there, and then they called the next day to make sure everything was fine. So I highly recommend Good Greek Movers. Thank you. Okay, guys, here we are. Let's do it.
Getting back to now, you're referring to the chief of patrol, I assume,
John
who
Shell,
has been making these statements. Now, everything he says is true, but it's not his place to do it. The police have to be apolitical. When you mix politics and police, you have disaster. And this goes back to the Tammany Hall days. It's the mayor's job. The mayor is an elected official. It's his job to badmouth them and bash them, not the police commissioner or any police executive. So what I'm trying to say is I thoroughly agree with his points and what he's saying, but it is not his place. And I think they're headed for trouble with what they're doing because the city council is reacting, and actually they're these people who are in the PD who are doing this, they're violating city law. You know, the city charter, there's specific legislation that says you cannot mix politics in with these situations. So that's my point.
Well,
So
I'll disagree because I don't think they're mixing politics. I think they're mixing what they're calling out policy.
I mean politicians.
Yeah.
Elections and things like
Yeah,
that.
I know, but when they're bringing out for the good of the department and the good of the city, I say yeah, only because we're in a crossroads right now. We got to fix this city, and they're frustrated that the cops are going out there every day and locking up bad guys, and then you're letting them go because of your ridiculous policies. And I don't think they're getting into politics to say vote for this guy or vote for that guy. They're just calling them out, the people that made these ridiculous laws that are just making it impossible to be a cop today.
No, they did make some reference to elections that you shouldn't vote for certain people. Again, it's the mayor's job to do it.
Well, I'm not policing them, so I don't know exactly what they say. But you know what? I got well, there comes a time in your life where you got to stand up for your cops, stand up for your men and women that are going out there and literally getting killed to do the job.
Yeah,
and
Officer
Giuliani
did that when he was mayor.
Yeah.
He was very outspoken.
Well, that's why we spoke about it before. If I don't know if he's listening to us, but if we could give the mayor advice, call them out. Call out the elected officials that just making this
Yeah,
city.
but he won't because he's a Democrat and they're all Democrats. And he's looking.
I know, but sooner or later you gotta say I'm a New Yorker, I'm an American, and I gotta call out
That's right.
the people that
correct.
that are
You got to put politics aside and do what's right.
exactly.
Pat, the administration today, as you mentioned, Madry and Shell and all them, they're very supportive of your programs, correct?
They're 1,000%.
that's what I
well,
believe, yeah.
having Nisa Rodriguez assigned to the program is
Right.
you can't imagine the burden that's lifted off me because now she's out there and she's cleaning up the.
So they've been very supportive.
Oh, they've been
Great to
very
hear.
supportive, and
That's good to
and
hear.
I think it's Madry actually boxed as a kid, and he.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
wow.
boxed as a kid, and he claims that boxing set him on the right path
good.
in life.
Good. We should have a smoker. We should have Madry and.
Yeah, I think we got to find a
You know?
a fire
Yeah.
chief that
Yeah, exactly.
that he matches
Chief
up
against
with.
Chief. We get Madry in the ring there.
Yeah, I think
that'd
that would be
great.
a sellout.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be a good smoker. Captain?
What role, if any, can your program training these children and working with them result in crime reduction?
Well, it's we get 50, 60 kids a day just in the Brooklyn gym. The other gyms are a little smaller. They get 20, 30 kids. But those are kids that are not on the street getting in trouble. Those are kids that are not addicted to their phones, playing video games, and sitting at home really not getting in physical condition. Just look what it does to a kid that comes into the program. They learn about nutrition because they want to eat right, because they love, after they're working out a little bit, how their body starts to evolve and look good. It's addiction in a good way. When we get the kids in there and they start learning about physical fitness and nutrition and staying off the streets, it's crime prevention. That's everything that teachers, that everything in city government should be doing is taking care of the kids. Because what kind of future we're going to have if every kid's just wreaking havoc in the streets? We're going to have the future. The future is dismal.
What you're saying goes back to the early days of the PAL.
Police Athletic League. Let me tell you something. The Police Athletic League taught me how to run this program. I was the director of boxing for the Police Athletic League for 20 years, and the guys at the time. The Police Athletic League was majority retired cops. I think the Police Athletic League got away from that now, which I think they need to bring back. You got to have retired cops working for the Police Athletic League. It just makes sense.
Relating to community policing. Now, community policing has always been around in different forms.
Yeah.
When I came in the department in 1959, you probably weren't even born then.
62.
We were all on foot. We had foot posts.
Beat cop.
Yeah, and we knew everybody.
And hence the beat book.
That was community policing.
Right.
We knew all the people
Yeah.
on our beat, and we knew the families, we knew the kids. So that was a rudimentary form of community policing.
Yeah. So community policing is bringing back. It's like bringing back the beat cop.
100%.
In a way,
It's not
right.
policing is not rocket science. Is accountability. You're accountable to the community, solve their problems, but you got to know how to solve their problem.
What we did was not a formalized form of
Right.
community policing. It didn't have a name. But in reality, it was community policing.
It was-
We were on
it
foot.
was absolutely,
Once
yeah.
they started taking the foot cops and put them in the radio cars, that was the end of it.
Yeah,
Because all you do is answer radio calls.
Well,
you went from one call to another.
But today's day and age, there's not enough manpower to have foot posts. I mean, even back in 1985, when I came on the job, where I worked in Midtown North Precinct, the roll call on a 4 to 12 was probably about 100 cops, easy. Today, you're lucky you have 15.
Yeah,
on a 4 to
I don't
12
know
roll
how to do it today.
So
really.
it's just you have
And that's-
minimum manning
And that's another
Yeah.
thing. The legislation, the politicians, we need cops. We need cops. And when they demonize the cops and when they defund the police, they're destroying every city across our country, every major city, by the whole defund the police. The cops are the bad guys, politicians. And now I'm retired and I can speak. If you live in a district where your crime is high, don't vote for the people that are creating these laws that say the good guys are the bad guys and the bad guys are the good guys.
Right.
Right. So
No.
it's common sense. And
Right. I mean, you need to get out the vote.
yeah.
You know, talking about it's one thing. You need to vote.
No, you have to. And if you're going to complain about crime in your community,
Vote.
Yeah, you got to vote for the right people that
Right.
want to institute,
Exactly.
that want to back the cops and want to just back common sense laws
Right.
that keep our community safe and take care of the kids.
At every level, state, state, and federal. We have a presidential race coming up in a few months as well. So get the vote out. Captain?
What ruined the rudimentary form of community policing that I was talking about was technology. When this 9/11 system came in, all we were doing was answering 9/11 calls. That's one of the reasons they pulled cops off foot and put them in the radio cars, because you had to respond to the 9/11 calls.
Right.
It was all computerized. Before that, it wasn't, it was really simple. So that changed a lot. So while technology increased some efficiency to a degree, it did away with, the basic police concept of dealing with the community on a local level like we did as foot cops. So now what do you see as the future of community policing? Do you think it's what you're doing or what you did is going to last?
Well, I hope that we could get more cops, because you have to answer 911 calls. Those are calls for service. Usually, when you call the 911 and not 311, it's a robbery, it's a burglary, it's an assault. You need cops there immediately. So you need those guys in a radio car, but you need to be able to have those units within a command that are able to solve the community's problems. And then you need the outside units to be responsive to those patrol units. And you need good commanding officers that are going to demand when that commanding officer goes to a community meeting, and when you have a problem in your community is when the place is packed and they're all complaining about the same block or the same condition. You got to be able to address that. Sometimes today, they don't have the resources within the command to address it on hand. They should be able to call in, which I know they do, call in the CRT units today, the critical
response team,
the community response teams, who are going out there, and those guys are doing real heavy duty police work, locking up bad guys with guns and stuff. But they should be targeted to assist those commanding officers that are dealing with just crime problems, chronic crime problems in their precinct. So because those guys, you can move around easy. In a precinct where your manpower is limited, it's tough. It's tough to deal with those problems. So the whole department's got to work together to accomplish the same goal, is to reduce crime and to lock up recidivists. Recidivism is so much, if it's addressed, and like I said, hold those district attorneys accountable that are letting these guys go. Hold the legislators accountable that made these ridiculous laws that are letting people out of jail and just to wreak havoc on the streets. That's the key to fixing this and bringing us back to the safest city in America and a city where people are not looking to flee. And I don't want to flee. I live in a city my whole life. I love it. I don't want to go, but I got grandkids now. And if things get bad, I'm going to have to do the right thing for my grandkids.
Sad but true.
New York.
Yeah.
Sad but true. Pat, you have any events coming up you'd like to let our listeners know about?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. June 7th in Madison Square Garden, we have first responders fighting for our future. It's all NYPD cops versus the FDNY, DSMY, corrections, court officers, a couple of National Grid guys, and it's cops. All the money's going towards the free Cops and Kids program. No cops make any money in that program. We do it for free on a volunteer basis, and we And we have a great program that's free for kids 12 to 21. I asked everybody to go to NYPDboxing.com and purchase tickets, make a donation, but come out. It's a great night of boxing. You're going to see cops, they're going to get a great belt, and it's legitimate, good boxing. We got a couple of heavyweights, cops that are fighting each other for the heavyweight NYPD championship belt.
Great.
Yeah, it's a great night of boxing. It's a great night out, and Tunnel of Towers. And the money's going to Tunnel of Towers and the Cops and Kids program. And Tunnel of Towers, I don't have to your audience, everybody knows Tunnel of Towers.
Of course.
Great organization that just paid off the mortgage for the Dilla family.
Right, Detective Dilla.
And I hope that Stephanie's there.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Pat, one more time, how do you purchase tickets?
NYPDboxing.com. You go there, you see the great work that your cops are doing every day.
Great.
And you'll see a lot of success stories, kids that came out of the program.
Pat, how can our audience, also, any listeners want to get in touch with you in regards to your program, Kids in Boxing?
Well, my email address is nypdboxing@aol.com.
One more time?
AOL, yeah, I'm a little
Say it one
old.
more time?
Yeah.
Say it one more time.
nypdboxing@aol.com. And our website has all the information, nypdboxing.com.
Right. Captain?
Well, I have to say that I'm very impressed with your dedication to the program that I hated. And,
I hope I changed your mind.
Typical boss. Typical boss. I mean, actually, you were boss too, Sergeant.
But you're a good advocate for the future of community policing, whatever name it has.
Thank you.
And I guess you could be an advisor for the future for people, police agencies that want to experiment.
Can I give my business a plug?
Please, please do.
Well,
Please do.
when I retired from the job, my father started a great business on Utica Avenue in the 6-7. And when I retired, he gave me the keys, and he turned around, and he says, "It's yours." And he was out, and he's been playing golf. He passed.
Nice. Oh,
he
sorry
passed,
about
but he left me a great business, and it's on Utica, Chef's Choice, on Utica Avenue in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, and best oxtail, best curry goat. we deliver to all the Golden Cross restaurants.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
By the way, I grew up in that neighborhood. I'm very familiar with Utica Avenue.
Yeah. It was a big cop neighborhood
I
at
used
the
to
time.
hang out in Church in Utica.
Church in Utica.
Right.
Great corner.
So I'd like to thank our guest, Pat Russo, boxing coach. And as you heard, if you've been listening, she does some great work, God's work. So if you like what you hear, folks, you can subscribe to Cop Talk. You can also follow us on Twitter at Cop Talk WABC. That's at Cop Talk WABC. Until next time, God bless law enforcement throughout the country. God bless the USA, and God bless you. Thank you for listening.
Hey, it's the Good Greek Spiro, and I have some exciting news. Good Greek has been awarded National Mover of the Year. You've trusted the Good Greek for decades with your family's moving and storage needs. Now Good Greek is proud to be the nation's top mover. So when it's time for you to move across town or across the country, trust America's best mover, Good Greek. Go to goodgreek.com for Good Greek, the National Mover of the Year.
Good Greek Moving and Storage, your superhero movers.